Hey, what's up and welcome back, y'all. So today we're talking about union and intersection types within TypeScript. Check this out. So this is a lot different than Python, but if you're familiar with Python, you might catch on a little bit quickly, but if not, I'll orient you as fast as I can. So basically what we're going to do is talk about the OR and functions here. Now, they look a little bit different, and I'll show you exactly what they look like here in a second. But these two operators are actually the logic that help us build enterprise-grade solutions. So let's actually open up VS Code, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So the first thing we're going to do is build out our blocks. So we're going to have 2 blocks, and then we're going to use the intersection type. So we're going to say type identity equals, open up the block with the curly bracket, and we're just going to keep it exactly like this. So ID, number, name, string. I'm cool with that. And then we want to make sure we close our curly bracket for the block and then end it with a semicolon to signify to TypeScript, hey, it's actually done with that block. So we're moving on to the next thing now. The next one is going to be type once again. And we're going to call this one contact. We're going to say equals. We're going to open it up again. And then we're going to say email string and then phone string as well. Right? So what we're doing here is we're actually defining exactly what we want in the format we want it in. So you can see we have different error messages here. It's basically saying, hey, you built out something, but we haven't called it yet. You haven't used it yet. So you might want to consider that. It's not necessarily going to stop it from running, but this is just saying, hey, you might want to think about this. So next thing we're going to do is say type employee. So we're going to call this employee and we're going to say equals identity and contact. And we're going to close that block. And now it's basically going to say, hey, you actually have an error because employee is defined but never used. Even though we defined and used identity and contact, we introduce employee because now employee is basically doing an intersection type and using the ampersand now to combine both of them together, right? So let's move on to the next line now. So we're just going to say const, and we're going to call this one employee 1, for example, and we're going to say employee and make sure sentence casing is correct here. We're going to open up the curly bracket and we're just going to say ID's 1, name is John Doe, email is whatever, right? So we can actually input that. So ID 1, which is awesome. Name is going to be Alice for this instance. And then email, I'm actually going to use an actual email here. So 123@gmail.com. And we're going to do that and put a comma. And it's asking for a phone number. We can do a phone number too. Great, right? Doesn't really matter. Now it's saying the same thing again. Employee 1 is assigned a value, but never used. So right now, so far, we have all these different 4 blocks we have are identified, right? ID is a number. If I just change this to a text real quick and said 00001, it would be saying type string is not assignable because it's not a number, right? So we're going to change that back to 1. And now we have the employee 1 assigned value still not used, right? So we're just going to keep it moving. All right. And the next thing we're going to do is end it with a semicolon. So we know we're moving on to the next block now. And we're just going to say console.log. So we're going to say employee 1. So now we have identified every single thing within our block of code here. We said, hey, these are our types we want. This is the type of function that we're going to have for employee. And this is the data that I have within employee 1. So return that for me. So the first thing I want to do is make sure I save it. All right, now we're going to open up the terminal. And all we're going to do is type in npx ts-node source practice. Make sure you spell it right and press enter. And now we have our entire object, if you will, that is ID 1, name, email, and the phone number. So that's all it takes for using the intersection type for the ampersand here, right? So that's how you bring in data together, especially if you have different types listed here. So now you can bring them and group them into one. But that's also dependent on making sure that the data is defined in one location, because if you're missing an email, for instance, right, it's going to tell you, hey, something doesn't make sense because you're missing something. So you want to make sure all the values are in there properly. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is union types. So this is going to be the OR operator that we have, and I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like. So here we're going to use a function, and we're going to call this function print ID. We're going to open it up, and we're going to say ID is going to be a number, and then we're going to use a pipe character here to define that it's OR. And then the next thing is going to be string. And we're going to do that, close that up, and then open up our curly bracket. And then we're going to start typing on the next line. So we're going to say console.log, open that up, and say your ID is, we're going to close up that double quotation. We're going to put a comma. We're going to say ID now because that's defined here as a number, right? Or string. We're going to close that up, close that block with a semicolon, and then we close up our curly bracket as well. And now we're going to say print ID. And we're going to assign it a value now of 101. And then we're going to say print ID again. And we're going to say 202. But this is going to be a text string value simply because we have double quotations around it, right? So let's run this from the top. So print ID is a function name we have here. And within print ID, we're basically saying, hey, the ID is either going to be a number or, with this operator here that we have, a string. So it can return either type. And then we open up our bucket here with console.log saying, hey, your ID, and put a space here, is going to be whatever this is. So it's actually going to return this. And then we left a space here so that there can be a space between this colon and then the actual ID that's going to be returned. And then we're defining the IDs right after it because we're writing out the full function here. And then we're saying, hey, we're now going to assign everything that we want and run it into here. And then once it's run in here, it's going to plug in here appropriately based upon what we inserted and typed right here. So we got to save this real quick. I'm just going to copy this so I don't have to type it again. And I'm going to run it one more time. And now it's saying our code is 101 and 201. So just like that, that's how OR operator works. Now another example I'm going to show you, I'm going to run real quick just for you, is going to look like this, right? So here we have payment method is going to be cash, credit, or PayPal. So any acceptable payment method. And the function is going to be checkout, right? So the checkout method here is going to be payment method. So that's going to be your method, right? So we're just bringing that in now within the function. And we're saying paying with this method. So we're bringing this here, and then we're bringing it here as well within the string that we want, the text result. And then we're saying checkout's going to be cash. So that's the string that we're putting in, the value that we're providing it back to here. So we can just run it straight from the top down. And then we're saying checkout credit as well. So what if we wanted to put checkout crypto? What's going to happen? It's saying its argument of crypto is not assignable to a parameter of type payment method because it's not defined here, right? So it has to be either cash or credit or PayPal because of this operator here. So we can't even use this, but everything here is going to run and is valid. But at the end of the day, union type creates flexibility because you have a different OR operator, so there's different options there, whereas intersection type actually enforces the structure. But hopefully this video helps you out. Let me know your thoughts down below, y'all. And as always, thanks for watching.